Hi everyone, welcome to The Lost Generation, outside of the mainstream. My name is William Hooker. I am a musician, poet, and part of this generation of artists. My goal with this podcast, which is being broadcast on its own YouTube channel and my website, williamhooker.com, is to introduce you to many of the musical artists that are outside of the mainstream and have made important artistic contributions to our culture. I have also interviewed producers of the music and many fans and supporters of this work. My guests are sharing what makes this art form unique and significant. I hope these conversations will inspire you to listen to the music, which may change you, and the way you view music, which again is outside of the mainstream.
Today, I am interviewing drummer and band leader Barry Altschul, who has spent a lot of his musical career living abroad. For the rest of the summer, we will be having one interview per month. We will resume our regular schedule of 2 interviews beginning in September 2019.
This is The Lost Generation, outside of the mainstream. This is a story that needs to be told. I'm excited, to say the least. Excited because of your enthusiasm and your spirit.
Thank you.
That's one thing I gotta say. And I'm talking to Barry Altschul. Why don't you tell these people in a few sentences about yourself? And
I was born in the Bronx in 1943. Still a couple of years left for World War II. And in a poor neighborhood. As a matter of fact, I don't know how many years I'm older than William Parker, but we came from the same neighborhood, about 10 years apart, maybe older. And there was music in the house. I grew up with the radio in the 1940s, which was playing the crooners and bebop on the radio. Through the 1950s, all the music I listened to was either the popular music of the day, which at that time was rhythm and blues and jazz. And then that's what I came up listening with the music. I wanted to be a musician since I'm 2 years old, as I know nothing else. And I'm first generation American. My parents are, one is from Poland, one is from Russia. And so there was always music in the house, mainly classical music. My sister was a concert pianist. And that was it. I grew up on the streets, trying to stay out of trouble playing music.
so let me ask you something about, do you recall at what point in your evolution that it hit you that you wanted to play this kind of music specifically, as opposed to the music that was in your home or around you, the bebop, et cetera, because I know you as a musician that has definitely been a force for stating free expression.
Yes, but
okay.
Coming up, there was the only free expression that I knew about was jazz.
Okay.
Was I won't say traditional because then you think of Dixieland or something like that.
Yes.
But of the bops, the bebop, the neo-bop, the after-bop, the hard bop, all that was the only music that was around. as far as it being freed up is concerned, I see a continuum of how it got freed up.
But when did it hit your soul specifically?
To play free music?
Yeah, to play in a different way.
I didn't. It never did.
It never did.
To this day, it never did. One day, I'm working as a janitor in a recording studio, and I got to talking to Paul Bley, who was in there doing a recording. A few weeks later, he calls me up to play a gig with him and Dave Eisenson. We opened up Slugs. It was a Sunday afternoon. Jerry Schultz, the owner of Slugs, was experimenting. And and Paul Bley said to me, do you want to play some standards, or do you want to play some music that I'm into? I was an arrogant kid. I said, play whatever you want.
Are you older than him, or same age?
I'm younger than him.
You're younger than him. By how many years?
By Paul Bley and them?
Yes.
At least 10.
I see. You were born what year?
43.
Ah, okay. All right. So
I joined Paul Bley in
well,
64.
Yeah.
So I was 21.
Okay.
And this was early 64, and I said, play whatever you want. So they started to play free, and I just responded. And how I related to it a bit was, I used to practice to my sister, practicing classical music, but I wasn't keeping time. I was like playing with it, playing melodies, playing freely with it. So when I started to play this way with Paul Bley, it was just very natural for me. I never listened to the music before. I mean, the closest I got to it when I was 16 or 17 was Ornette, and then Train. But by that time, I was already playing with Paul Bley, and there was 5 of us in New York that was playing free, and that was Sonny Murray, Milford Graves, Rashid, Andrew, and myself, Andrew Cirillo and myself, at that time. And we were all involved with the Jazz Composers Guild and the October Revolution in Jazz. The offices was over the Village Vanguard. There was a dance studio there where we discussed the music. I mean, really discussed the music. Talked about what would happen when you eliminate bar lines, when you don't play rhythm in a certain way, and so on. It was all discussed and talked about. And then everyone who was part of the Jazz Composers Guild formed their own group. I wasn't a leader. I was working with Paul Bley. I was a drummer with Paul Bley. But that got me involved with a lot of people. I played with Albert Eiler. I played with all of those cats at that time. And then it just became playing straight time. I always loved that, and I still love to do it, and I do it. But that part of my career hasn't been publicized. I mean, I played with Hampton Hawes and Sonny Chris for 9 months. I was in Art Pepper's band. I was in Lee Konitz's band. I was in all kinds of bands playing straight ahead. My reputation was more open. Where my gigs were coming was more open. And plus, I felt more open. What can I say? I mean, I remember playing with Lee Konitz. And in my mind saying, okay, I'm going to try to push him to the next place.
Okay.
And I was doing that until they would turn around, or I would feel they were uncomfortable. But I would try to push him out as much as possible. And in a sense, that worked against me too. So, I mean, career-wise.
I hear you. That's beautiful. Now, there may be some people that you may know about. May I ask you another question a little bit later? But do you know the people I'm gonna throw at you? Just tell me if you know something about the music specifically, and if you do, just elaborate on it again. George Lewis.
George Lewis? You mean George Lewis, not the old George?
George Lewis.
I know George Lewis very well. He came to live with me as soon as he came out of Chicago. Muhal was living with me for 1.5 years. And because Muhal was living with me, I was accepted, in a sense, by the Chicago Cats. And a lot of them came from Chicago. I had a very big place at the time. And they came and stayed with me for a while. And so,
I had no idea.
Steve Coleman, Borelli,
John Paul.
Yeah, these cats came and stayed with me, right from Chicago.
Wow.
So George Lewis.
What can you tell me about his music?
George Lewis is a genius. What can I say? I think, he's one of the greatest trombonists on the planet. He can play any style of music. I mean, his father was, I think, a postal worker, and his father was very into swing jazz, and wouldn't accept George's music until he got the gig with Count Basie. George was in the section with Count Basie for a while. He took, whose place for a while? Curtis Fuller. Took Curtis Fuller's place.
What distinguishes him from Curtis Fuller, musically?
His concept.
All right. Tell me about
George Lewis's concept is off the planet, man. He's off the planet. I mean, his concept is truly my concept of free music. My concept of free music is the more vocabulary you have, the freer you are.
The more vocabulary you have, the freer you are.
The more musical vocabulary you have, the freer you are. If you're a poet, you only can deal with 20 words. That's one thing. If you have 100 words, you're freer in your expression. Same thing with music. George Lewis. This is beyond, to me, beyond category as far as his knowledge of his vocabulary is concerned. And then he goes beyond and goes into the electronic music scene.
All right, yeah.
A whole other thing. And then he's writing all these books, and he's just, and a very sweet guy.
Oh, absolutely. All right, now. Oliver Lake.
What about him?
Tell me about his music. And what you perceive, where you perceive
Oliver's we're playing together now, and it's really the first time I'm getting a chance to really see Oliver's thing, you know?
Yes.
Which is very creative and very original and very fluid. Great sound, great feeling, very nice cat. But I'm still getting to know Oliver musically.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know George since he's 18 or 19 is when we saw.
Oliver we're talking.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oliver, I knew back then from the St. Louis Cats. I was really friendly with people like Philip Wilson and Bobo Shaw.
All right, now wait a second. See, now you're getting into it. Because, all right, we're talking about this whole branch of the trade.
Okay.
See, Barry, that's why, obviously, you're doing it already. I don't even have to.
Okay, well, if you want to do it that way.
Yeah, you're doing it.
Okay, Chicago had Steve McCall. That's all I know about from Chicago.
Okay.
Moyer came later.
Okay.
Then there was Bobo Shaw in St. Louis and Philip Wilson, who was another one of those cats who could turn around and play with a blues band and then turn around and play with the art ensemble.
Yes.
Out in California was Oliver Johnson.
Oh, okay.
Who was hooked up at that time with Raphael Garrett, who came out of Chicago and went out to California.
I didn't know that.
So I knew, Callow Scott. You hit the Callow Scott, the cello player. He used
From where?
From New York. He used to be a saxophone player. Something happened to his embouchure. He started to play free cello, standing up with a cello on a saxophone strap, like that. Callow Scott. Look him up, man.
I'll check this out. Check this dude out. Wow.
Same Ray Draper.
Oh, yeah.
Miscellaneous cats.
Yeah, but no, I'm glad you're saying this, because you see, a lot of people really, they just think about naming people, and that's it. That's as far as it goes. They don't realize how many hundreds of people there are that have made contributions to this music.
Saxophone player, you never heard of him, I'm sure. Bill Carducci.
No.
He came out of Carla Bley's band, man. He was bad, man, in the 1960s. He's getting Carducci, Bill Carducci.
So based on this deep knowledge and all these people that you know, what do you think is what do you think is our contribution that we've made to this music since Cecil, Ornette, Train, Jackie McLean?
Incredible.
Well, all right, yeah, please.
You take a look at all the young cats today. After the Wynton Marsalis Young Lion period, right? People like Nasheed Waits and that generation of cats, they all played inside and outside equally well, and the outside is great, man. So it's part of the vocabulary now. What we did in the 60s has now become part of the vocabulary, even though the mainstream cats are still more mainstream, but they use some out shit in their music too. And that's because it's now accepted, because we went through the changes to make it accepted.
Beautiful. That's what I wanted you to say.
Shit.
That's what I wanted you to say. Because that's what should be acknowledged. You see where I'm coming from with this?
Yeah.
Because it's easy.
If it wasn't for grants, Cecil would have been starving, Sam River would have been starving. All these people wouldn't have had shit if it wasn't for grants.
Okay.
Until later.
Monetary resources.
Yeah, well, that's, they called it free music, but we wanted to get paid to play.
I got you.
And all these cats, if it wasn't for their grant, until later on, when they became accepted as not mainstream, but part of the scene.
Right.
Cecil, and Cecil wants to work the vanguard, he can.
Right.
But I'm
talking about everybody since that. I'm talking about after that period, and I think that you really said something that it should be noted by these people that talk about the history of jazz and all this stuff. I think what you're saying is so profound, about our contribution and how that contribution has expanded to now. That people feel good about inside and outside.
Not only that, but now as far as the outside is concerned, there's a whole circuit. They're gigs. There were no gigs back in the 60s. We had to create our own. That's why lofts came into being. There was no place to play. You rented a loft to live in, and then you had people come over. And then Europe heard about it and started to call it loft jazz and brought us over. And so that's part of how the reputation of the music grew. But the first time I went to Europe with Paul Bley, and at that period he was playing very free. An album called Blood, it was very open. I borrowed Han Benning's drums, who wasn't playing free at the time. He was playing with Eric Dolphin and Sonny Rollins and Wes Montgomery and all those cats.
Right.
So one of the only European cats that was playing free in the 60s like that was Brotzman and Peter Kofold. They both lived in this town called Wuppertal, and they were playing that way. Yeah, they were playing that way.
Let me just flip this thing over a little bit. John Betsch.
Still my great buddy, living in Paris, great drummer, man. Just kicked the shit out of cancer. And, and beautiful.
What's his? How does he approach the drum set? From your eyes,
he approaches the drum set the same kind of way I approach the drum set, coming up through the tradition of being influenced by people like Philly Joe Jones, Max Roach, Roy Haynes, Elvin Jones, Tony Wood. He's the same thing, and then he put that together in his own head to go another direction.
I see.
So he's another one of those very fluid, from ragtime to no time players, which is an expression that I use a lot that I got from Beaver Harris.
Of course. Thank you for tuning in. In months ahead, you will have the opportunity to hear from many more Lost Generation artists and supporters. The audio-only version is available wherever you get your podcast. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to hear upcoming episodes.